This week on the VC React podcast, Robinhood is expanding to Dubai. Big US and European unicorns like Binance, Shopify, Stripe, Bolt, and now Robinhood are entering the GCC directly. Is this a sign that MENA is seen as an attractive emerging market now? And does this mean local startups are forced to compete on a global level? If the old MENA VC playbook was copy and hope to be acquired, what happens when the copied ones just walk into your market? What does that mean for local copies, and how are founders and VCs reacting to this? While the world is chasing AI, MENA is doubling down on gaming. With funding rounds coming in bulk, 17 game studios from Mirac's Accelerator and 5 more from Impact 46. What's really happening here? Can just one or two funds create a whole industry? Is Mirac's full stack capital model the future of building regional categories from scratch? And finally, with all this funding, should local game developers lead with local stories and globalize later, or go global first and localize later? Let's dive in. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the VC React podcast. Every week, we bring you insights and reactions from top VCs, LPs, and angel investors reacting to the latest news on startups, funds, and investment rounds. Let's jump into it with our guests for today. Fahad Alfaez, investment manager at Jahez, Hussein Attar, CEO at TechInvestCom, and my co-host Jamie Lane from FWDstart. In the video description, you can find more details on our guests, their LinkedIn profiles, and links to their companies' websites. Our weekly news are brought to you by FWDstart, a twice-weekly newsletter that breaks down what's happening in the MENA startup, VC, and tech space. What's happening this week? Tell us more about Robinhood.
Yeah, Robinhood is an interesting one. I have to admit to having never used Robinhood. Did you use it when you were in the States, Ahmad? By any
I
chance?
did. It was my go-to place for trading stocks.
What was your experience like at your interest?
It's amazing. It's not complicated. It's not like the others, the traditional brokers or even the banks ones. It's very simple, straightforward. With this interface, you don't get lost in the app.
Yeah, they've had a remarkable year as well. Especially, I mean, I think the stock is trading up 400+% in the last 12 months. They've reached the market cap something like 95 billion. And as you sort of earmarked at the beginning, it's definitely a trend that you're seeing the sort of established global players now looking at entering the region. I know there was talk about obviously Revolut have applied for their license in UAE context. Rumors maybe that they're looking at potentially acquiring a bank, a local bank as well, to maybe expedite that process, if at all possible, because I think it's taking longer than they thought it would.
That's
But
very interesting. Acquiring
yeah.
a bank, not a startup. Wow. Okay.
Apparently, I suppose the trading space is slightly different to Revolut, though. I guess on the neobank side of things, we don't really have established incumbents like you have Rio and like UAE, or you've D360 and Saudi now. But with trading, we have your Sarawak and UAE, you have Baraka, Saudi, you have Thunder in Egypt. So it's quite a bit different in that you've kind of like, you have a spread there. But Robinhood is globally the big daddy, I think, for want of a better word. I don't know if you've seen as well that the CEO Vlad Tenev has kind of been doing the rounds on every podcast going at the moment. I know he was on 20VC recently. He was on Stripe's new podcast with John Collison as well, which is particularly interesting with the sort of advent of Robinhood's desire to tokenize private companies as well. So recommend taking a look at that and seeing how the tension plays out in real life between a company who's staunchly opposed to going public and a company who wants to tokenize their shares. But it's interesting. So look, they've applied for the cash before license. They've hired someone in situ as well, the former Equity Group and Saxo Bank executive Mario Camara. But look, I don't have any idea on the timeline or how long this is necessarily going to take, but it'll be interesting to see how the local players react to Robinhood's entry and how that disrupts them.
Okay, so Hussein and Fahad. So I'm so happy that such a big US player is expanding to GCC. This is a signal that GCC is one of those big and growing emerging markets that those big unicorns are coming to the region. And honestly, part of having this podcast in English is to communicate what's happening in the MENA region with global VCs and founders. However, this also means we're not competing locally anymore with all of these companies. Will people in the UAE, Saudi, and other markets really switch from the existing platforms to Robinhood? Do you think they will? Or will Robinhood, target the younger ones and the expats maybe?
First, I would like to thank everyone for hosting me here, and always happy to join the podcast and sharing our experiences. So, in regarding to this subject, in my opinion, I think your question in the beginning was about acquisitions also. Like usually we see global companies coming, acquisitions, that's the whole story of local startups. But when you see the reality, it's not always the case. I'll give you the example of Uber and Careem. So when Uber and Careem happened, Uber was like, no, we can do it. We'll come in. And they've tried the market until they noticed that they can't compete with this strong competitor. So it's better to acquire them. And I think it really depends on who's the local competitors that you have and how much traction or strong technology or solutions they might have that is worth the acquisition of doing so. It's not always on the user base. It's about what else are you gaining from doing so. And in my opinion, I think still all the players in that market no one has the strongest traction in that, to be honest. Even if they've reached to Series B and so on, when it comes to the trading aspect of it, they're still all on the early stages. You have also in Saudi Awaed, and of course you have the most, I think, biggest entity that has this market share is Diraya, who just went IPO with this solution. Now they're not a startup, they're a company. So I don't think they'll be open for that acquisition. But the rest, I think, are all still in the early stages of trading. So when a big company like Robinhood looks into the region, how much really user base are they buying? What's the technology or users they might be acquiring? If there is a problem with licensing, I think then they might consider say, okay, let's buy a company for the license. That's my opinion. Fahad, what do you think?
First of all, thank you for having me. I totally agree with you, Hussein. If we look at this news of international players coming to the region, I think this is a great evidence that the GCC, the MENA market, is an attractive market. There is a good and decent, basically, GDP per capita. This is the first aspect of it. The second aspect is the challenge when it comes to international players trying to capture market shares in GCC without setting up shops, without having a team on the ground, is a bit challenging. You might be able to get some traction here and there with satellite offices, with international presence, but having a team on the ground, setting up shops in GCC in MENA would definitely make it different. The competition would be easier with the local players. If we look at, for example, the growth that is happening in trading in Saudi, for example, into international markets, in 2020, the US market exposure for Saudi investors was 6%. It grew tremendously until 18% in the first quarter of 2025. So the appetite for first retail investors, US markets, grew tremendously, and having the right platform, having the right experience is extremely important. As also Hussein mentioned, the local players are always the first option for locals. They understand their consumer behavior, they understand their needs. And this is the challenge I think would face when it comes to competition with local players. You in Saudi, for example, or looking at trading and investments, you have your robo-advisory startups when it comes to investments, and you have the trading platforms similar to Arad and other also platforms. So I think if setting up offices and shops with basically doubling down in the region, there might be a decent competition.
Maybe one point that they chose UAE for the starting point. And I believe that has to play with the easier regulation than maybe dealing with SAMA and Saudi. And again, Dubai being a hub of where a lot of fintechs are able to come in and try and talk about tokenization. I think it's a landing ground of come here, play around, let's see how we can work together. And it's a brand name, Robinhood, known worldwide. And every pitch that came to us from all of those other players we're the Robinhood of the region. So definitely they are a brand name to worry
Yeah.
about. But still, I think the local ones understand the needs, the requirements of the local users. And many of them had to go through a lot of education of those users. What does it mean to trade? Like people who started from the beginning. Yes, there are some traders that decide to utilize their platform, but they were also expanding that user base and educating people to enter into this US trading and how to do social trading also.
So it seems that they did the hard work for Robinhood to come here. But anyway, you're both defending local startups. Let me push back a little bit. Saying you mentioned Careem. With Careem, it's mobility, it's boots on the ground. You need to create this network of captains or drivers. You need to be on the ground dealing with, the cars and the fleets and everything. But with fintech, it's mostly a software play, especially with trading. And as Fahad mentioned, the number of or the percentage of Saudi traders who have tapped into the US market or international markets is growing. So maybe traders would prefer to invest through an American company to invest in or buy shares in other American companies, not to go through the local ones. I don't know. What do you think?
I think to many investors, having a Saudi, I'm talking maybe on the Saudi, but seeing the Saudi office in front of you gives you more comfort that this is someone, if I have a problem, I can go and complain to. Instead of this international person that I can't reach out to. And when I try to do customer service, I can't have someone to call. That's a problem. Here you have a regulator who's very strict on any fintech that's dealing with people's money. And they've created a lot of trust and credibility that no one can play with people's money in Saudi. So lots of Saudis prefer the local licensed companies because they know they are in good hands.
That goes back to Fahad's point. If they have an office here, the license here, then they have a bigger chance of, winning.
This is what competition gives you. So, with the growth in trading in the US market, retail investors tapping into the space, you started seeing the startups popping up, trading startups doing zero commission trading and so on and so forth. Today, you started seeing large traditional banks, capitals are providing the same services with and competing commissions, zero commission trading, a great user experience, user interface to trade either globally or even locally, which was there for a while. It improved the service, it made it easier, and basically the end consumer is the one benefiting from that.
I have two more questions on this. One from the founder perspective and one from the BC perspective. If you're a founder today in this vertical, what would you think about? What ideas should you start working on or exploring or testing, knowing that the global players are coming? Or what would you advise founders to focus on now?
One of the things I would suggest for founders is to see where is the hardest point. The hardest point is onboarding, how to get the biggest number of user base. And to do that, you have to think of where are the touch points that these people start. Is it work, friends, their bank, other fintechs, savings? Where's the point that I can help convert these type of users towards starting to invest? And I don't know if you've noticed that many of the personal financing companies switched from personal finance into trading because they noticed that was one of the key touch points where, okay, now you save some money. How about we make more money for you by investing? And that was the transition into investing there. Some of them were looking at how to get into the open banking and integrating with the different solutions so that they're a solution part of another solution that the user might be interacting with. And I think that's one way for founders to look at how to really hit that hardest point at the beginning is the onboarding part.
So are you suggesting that they do this on top of the infrastructure players, like use Robinhood and Bark as APIs, and capitalize on that and provide this new service to your customers, whether it's in personal finance or in something else? Or are you suggesting that they do that as a way to bring in the customers and then get their own license for
It's on the
trading?
second part. Again, I'm talking about the mentality of a person who's trying to compete into this industry, because again, there's still no big player in this market.
Okay.
If you believe you have the right solution, the right way, the right twist in your business model that will give you that edge, the market's still open for you to capture it.
Okay, Fahad, what do you think?
I think it all goes back to user experience and user interface. If you are buying an Apple's share, you will own it either through Robinhood, either through Sky or the other platforms, depending on which platform you use. What makes consumers use specific product or app is the ease of use, the user experience, the user interface, the features that a trader would focus on. If I'm a trader, I would look at different tools that I'll be using to trade, for example, different features, different news that you can basically use, technical analysis, historical skills, and all that sort of things is basically the go-to tool and the go-to app for active traders. So having these tools, having these features in basically a one-stop shop for traders would make platform the first option to trade.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So add more features. The user experience is more important now. The last question is from the investor perspective. We, as investors, we used to focus on investing in copies of successful business models from the US and Europe. Now, it seems that this model is not really working that much. Of course, we had the success stories of Amazon and Souk. We had Maktub, Yahoo, we had Uber, Careem, etc. But it seems that the global players are expanding to those emerging markets, including us here in MENA. Should we consider changing that investment thesis? Should we consider investing in solving our own problems first and maybe globalize them, or focusing on deep tech?
Copying blindly doesn't work. Like just saying, oh, what's successful, let's try to copy it here. You really have to see if this market really accepts this type of business model. Will it work here? Does the consumer behavior or the businesses, well, operation or regulation really supports this type of startup to be copied here? I'm not against copying. Again, copying just means that something worked, maybe it works here, but just copying it without making sure first that it works or not is very important. But trying to create something unique is also important. It is harder. Many of the problems that any country or users face are faced globally, and that's why these things can go global, and these are why things get copied. Creating unique solutions, there aren't much things in the culture or the people is that unique between these countries. There are some, I always give maybe Cuba or Circles as an example of, okay, this is something maybe more from the region that was a problem that actually solved in the fintech side in Saudi and actually in MENA as an example of something unique to our culture than others, or more prevalent than others. But then when you look into it, there aren't much things out there. The deep tech side is important. And as you can see, the kingdom is investing a lot into deep tech, and whether it was also the big guys, Neom, Aramco, trying to capture national companies, bringing knowledge transfers here, just so that we start to have our own innovation technology exports from Saudi.
Definitely. It's not a matter of copying as much as there is a pain that was basically has been noticed globally. Uber, for example, there is a pain in finding a taxi. This is a global pain which can be replicated in each market. These are basically the thesis. There is the same pain here in the MENA region, so it makes sense to launch a business with the same business model. Innovation when it comes to localizing basically the business, not copying, as Hussein mentioned, everything with the same concept also makes sense. And tapping into the local basically pains that are not there globally is key for, I think, going forward for the ecosystem.
You talked about trading. Let's talk about the Saudi stock market. I'm not asking about Jahez, so in general, what's happening with the stock market today?
If you know, please let me know.
Okay.
Basically, if you see the Saudi market, I think it was one of the few markets that made losses year to date compared to different markets. To be honest, I don't have clarity what is the reasons. Performance-wise, I think of public equity, public companies were okay, but still not clear.
I think that's the $1 billion question. Everyone's really confused about why that's the case, because again, all the other indication of the Saudi market itself and the economics, where Saudi's heading, Vision 2030, is all on the optimistic side. But again, I think it's normal cycles that any market goes through, ups and downs. People see where the risk could be and want to mitigate it. They have it withdrawn. Maybe they're seeing other opportunities where the money should be. Maybe they're investing it into current projects, so they had to withdraw it from the public market. Many theories, let's say, that's out there. But it's very clear that I think the last statistics I saw that retail investors have increased, foreign investors have increased investing into the market. The most withdrawals were from the institutional investors in Saudi, and their withdrawal caused this piece in the market. But again, I think as any market, this is the buyer's time. So if you have cash, you're getting into stocks in very early stage, and these are where people who know investing are excited about. This is what they want. They don't want always high numbers. They want low numbers so they can buy new money.
On that, I read that statistics seen on the withdrawals from the Saudi market, which is basically, it was the majority from the institutional side, and the retail investors and foreign investors are the one buying. I read a tweet for Mohammed Al-Alwan on Twitter or X, which is an amazing analysis. Basically, the reason behind that is there are some swaps transactions that are done by institutional investors in Saudi and for international players. So if you combine both, it would be net. It would be showing sale on the books of institutional investors, and it would be shown as buying for international players. This is why you see this insight is a bit misleading for at face value.
Okay, let's move on to gaming. Jamie, what's happening with the gaming industry in MENA?
Yeah, I was going to say lighter subjects, but nonetheless a colossal business. Unfortunately, my gaming knowledge only extends to the fact that my wonderful fiance bought me a PS5 for my birthday maybe 2 years ago, but I don't think I've actually switched it on in the last 12 months. So it's just gathering dust.
Oh my God,
it just
Jamie,
looks nice.
give it to me. Give it to me.
Honestly, yeah. Over me, yeah, absolutely. Just gathering dust at the moment. But look, something that I was struck by, especially as someone who only moved to the UAE 4 years ago now at this stage, is the extent to which gaming is colossal, and it's very explicit and visible, even walking through something like a mall. I don't know if it's the same thing in a Saudi context, but the amount of sort of gaming cafes, which are just the connotation of a gaming cafe in the UAE context versus what I would have thought it was from an Irish context are two very different things. The ones here are very, very high tech, very modern, and it's just the degree to which they're just packed full of people, because you kind of see these statistics thrown out in terms of the size of the gaming market in a UAE or a Saudi context. But when you see it backed up visibly in the flesh, you're like, oh, okay, I understand this. And look, with that in mind, Impact 46 have been very busy of late deploying from their 40 million gaming fund. We've sort of had a drip feed of, we had Spectre Games, which was announced a couple of weeks back, and then we had Spoils, and then they decided, you know what, we're just going to announce 6 all at the one time. And so that's what they did. They announced they deployed $6.6 million across a variety of different titles. So you have Alpaca, actually based in Istanbul, I believe, kind of like hybrid casual action games for mobile based. Starvania, a Saudi PC console fantasy games. Game Cooks, I think founded in Beirut, now have a presence in the Valley as well, but they're expanding into Saudi, interestingly enough, which is definitely a trend that we've seen, I think, in terms of the international investments so far from Impact 46 out of this gaming fund, NJD, and then Fahad Studios, who have announced subsequent to this $1.75 million round, also backed by Marek Capital. who also graduated a ton of startups from their accelerator. Yeah, like I'm gonna be honest, I haven't gone through all 17, but I'm sure they're great.
Yeah.
But it's testament to the momentum and the extent to which there's this sort of firm conviction. I think that there's a massive opportunity in the domestic gaming space, especially.
What caught my attention, Jamie, is they announced the fund, like for Impact 46, they announced the fund last year, right? More than a year ago. And zero announcements on funding, or maybe one, maybe just one, yeah. And now
Yeah.
6 of them at once. Why?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think, is there any like seasonality attached to that? I don't know. Is it too hot to go outside and they're hoping that you capitalize on the on the gaming side of things? Potentially, I don't know. I don't know. It's maybe aligned with the esports season as well. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I know these aren't explicitly in that particular vertical, but I know it's not too far away from this particular time that things ramp up as far as that's concerned. So maybe it plays into that. That's my best hunch, I guess.
Okay, Hussein, when Jamie said seasonality, gave him a thumbs up.
EWC, the World Gaming Conference, this
Mm.
brings all players, all teams, all investors, everyone who's interested in the gaming industry in one place. And you don't get that a lot. And if you've seen the timeline of the announcement of the fund was when the EWC was happening. The investors now announced is when it's happening. So definitely it's a timely thing because again, the industry is still in its early stages. There aren't much companies there. Both RAC and Impact, they raised investments from a particular LP, a government LP that's focused on empowering the gaming industry. So it is a government-pushed initiative to help create an industry here in the gaming world. Yes, we have PIF companies like Savvy, who's acquiring shares in the most popular gaming studios across the board. They have also a community building local gaming enthusiasts, and also MCIT creating accelerator focused on gaming. There are many different initiatives focusing on empowering, but you really need money pouring into these different studios, creating, trying out, doing, failing, succeeding, going global. These are what any cycle of startups need to go through so that we can become a bit more mature and start to have a really competing industry towards the world.
Fahad, what do you think? What's happening with gaming? Why all of a sudden?
Basically, I think the gaming industry has been growing tremendously in Saudi. From a consumer point of view, I think I've read once that the Saudi gamers are the highest when it comes to spending on gaming. So that's basically a no-brainer to develop basically Saudi games, to have esports tournaments, having the industry and having Saudi as the go-to basically place for gaming. This is when it comes to esports and tournament. When you look at gaming, with the first wave of gaming in Saudi, Web 2. And this is the first thing that comes to mind about, which is a card game and that is very popular in Saudi.
There was a game, Kamilna.
Yeah.
And
Kamilna,
there
I
was
think.
some others, yeah.
Yeah, I think Kamilna is the most popular game when it comes to Parrot, or drifting, basically. Those two were the go-to or the first options when it comes to developing games. Today, I think there are a lot of opportunities to develop further games that is basically localized to the region and to the behavior of this community. The second point, the first also phase, is having international games and translating them to the region. That was the local touch. Today, having gaming studios development that is done in the region would make it totally different. If we see those companies, they can also grow further to becoming publishers of these games, growing beyond the platforms that they are on today. So I think with further funding, further attention to the space, growth of these startups and companies would be something that is done easily.
So Fahad, let me stay with you. You mentioned Balot and drifting, and those are two very local things in Saudi and in MENA in general. The same question that I asked earlier about start for game studios. Should they focus on a local game story and then take that global, or bring a story that would work everywhere in the world and focus on localizing it later on? What do you think? Should they start?
I think it's basically both. You can do both. You can you can start having local games that is for locals, as well as tapping into and expanding into the international markets. So having, for example, gaming is totally different than trading, for example. In trading, you'd need to be there, you'd need to be visible, you'd need to build relationship with stakeholders. For gaming, no, you can just do programmatic advertisement, marketing, and promotions, and basically you'll be in all countries. I think there was a company back in 2021, Salah, which was the top ranked in the US market, which was a regional company. There was no office, I think there was no office in the US, there was no presence there, but it grew tremendously because it didn't need to have presence there. Same with gaming, you can target international markets without having presence there.
Yeah, I remember Sarah was a huge success story of a Saudi company that goes global big time. But then, things happened and they didn't continue. Hussein, what do you think about game studios? What should they focus on?
I think they need to focus local, just because, again, when it comes to gaming,
Okay.
you're building a storyline, a design, a focus, a messaging that works for a specific segment. When you do one that's global, you really need to have a strong global team that understands how the different cultures see the characters and the storyline, and how they like these things to be marketed for. And when it comes to the local Saudi companies, I think we're still in the early stages that it's hard for global. Focus on your market to build for your local culture that you understand or maybe have an edge for. And once you build traction on a couple of games, then later on you can focus on creating a global solution. Yes, you can advertise to the global world, but in the end, what makes the business model work for gaming, it's the marketing spend. Every dollar is calculated for. If you decide to say, oh, let's advertise in Georgia, or like, what? You're spending money. If you're spending money and not getting that return, you're losing. And if that money doesn't return investment, you're losing on the bigger game of that business model. So focus on where you can spend and get money. And then as you grow and understand how to market better for the global, you can start working there.
Interesting, Hussein. I know a Saudi company that is doing similar stuff, unintentionally had a lot of customers from South America. Had all of a sudden, was from Brazil, Argentina, representing concentration there. So
No,
it might
it
come
came
organically.
by the way, Saraha did not advertise there. It came on a viral way. So people used it in schools and some
Yeah.
places, and that organic marketing, sure, why not? Happy to do so. But if you're spending on advertisement, you need every money for that to count for you back.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Okay. Jamie, did you get to go through the companies that Impact 46 invested in, not the 17 ones, the 5 or 6 ones? Because I went through some of them and I noticed you mentioned Alpaca. Alpaca got investment from A16Z Speedrun, which is the kind of the in-house accelerator for A16Z. And they got investment from another VC called Lotus. I went to their website and it just speaks to you that, hey, we are a game investors. It's amazing. Look at this. This is a VC website. It's the first time I see something like this. It's, it communicates very clearly their investment thesis, right? And let me go back to Mirak and Impact 46. Let's talk about these two VC firms, if you don't mind. Let's start with Impact. So Impact has a seed fund, a growth fund, multiple single company funds. And last year, they announced this gaming fund. It's quickly becoming one of those multi-stage VC firms in MENA, focusing only on MENA startups with more than 40 portfolio companies. How do you think a company like Impact 46 can express themselves? I went to their websites in comparison, and I saw it's a very traditional website, and they don't even mention the game fund as VCs in the MENA region who are trying to attract many international companies or startups or founders to come to the MENA region and start here. How can we better communicate ourselves, our messages, our investment thesis?
So I think when it comes to Impact specifically, I believe they've created the brand name of who they are, and they've built that pipeline. That part of it could be on the gaming side. That what they've showcased is that we are the type of investor that if we invest, we can get you IPO, and that's the story they have. And here we have Jahez as one of their examples, and they show that case that we are the type of investor that with you to the long run. And every VC has their own story. There are the VCs that said we're the first people in, will come and lift our sleeves and join you. The other VCs that says no, we're here for institutional investments. We only come with big money. Every VC has their own story. I think Impact, because they have a wide range of investments, they have a traditional. We've done it. This is the success stories. These are the portfolio companies we have. You want to be part of it? Apply to us. And if it was gaming, they'll push it to the gaming fund. If it was too big for the seed, they'll push it for growth. And that they have just one portal for communication. That gaming fund, I think they're very focused on sector focus. I don't think Impact has I think they did for a while. They had marketplace and so on for the seed fund, but now it's more sector agnostic for any startup can come and they'll navigate it to the right fund to invest into it.
Yeah. Fahad, what do you think? What can VC funds do more to communicate their investment thesis and their brand?
Probably, as Hussein mentioned, Impact is well known, one of the most well known VC firms in the region with great traction basically in the region. When it comes to communication, I think this is a personal opinion, by the way, having cars, having these sort of basically icons, it communicates that you are gaming. I'm looking at it from a branding point of view. It communicates that you are focusing on gaming, but you can also communicate that naturally with basically having a gaming fund, having a dedicated team for that, having presence and doing deals in that, and it will be communicated. The ecosystem, I would say, very small for you to know that there are gaming funds based out of the region. So adding an icon or two wouldn't make a difference for a founder that is looking for a gaming fund to raise fund from.
Yeah, not really just talking about icons, but it's about the message, how to communicate the message. And Hussein, you're one of the few VCs in the region who is taking media seriously, and you created your own personal website with this directory of and every time you're here I talk about this directory because I want to promote it, the directory of all the VC funds in the MENA region. And even
sorry to interrupt you, Ahmed. I'm a huge fan of the director of Hussein. Whomever asked me about the ecosystem, I sent the website of Hussein Attar, and you'll find everything there. So hats off.
Of course. Yes.
Maybe
Definitely. That's why I'm asking this question. I mean, more VC funds and investors should adopt this media
one maybe
strategy.
update here. Maybe you'll first hear it. That's going to be a huge upgrade for the website. It will be much easier to navigate, and much more data will be available there. So keep tuned soon. But there are some VC funds that do take it seriously. But again, it is expenses in the end. How much you can invest into having a dedicated person for marketing, for putting information out there, what's really useful for the people. I think VC tried to do it in their own way. You had Noah Capital doing their own podcast. You had Impact doing a report with coordination with Mobiles 0 to 1. You had every organization trying to see, okay, what's the thing that we can do that can create impact, that can help people, that can help create a good branding for ourselves. Some of them do it with a person. So considering Walid Ballah, he's a very active personality, but again, he represents Sukna. But he goes in every accelerator.
Yes.
He's a judge. He helps many of these government organizations with their initiatives. So he's doing it with his own personal capacity. So I believe everyone's trying to do their own thing if they can, but having a dedicated media empire under their arm, I don't think we're yet in a VC that can handle that much costs.
I second that. Walid Billah is very generous with his time, with everyone. And I have one last question, and this time is about Mirak. And I really like what they're doing, but I just want to ask about that model itself. So they have an $18 million fund. It's not just backing startups, it's building the pipeline. The founder would start with Excel, the accelerator, and over a 2-year program, they would get $300,000 of investment. I know half is cash, half is in kind, but they also follow up on these investments. Whether your company is local or global, just come in, of course, post idea stage, come in, and we will take care of you from seed to IPO. At least that's the promise that they have. They have seed, early, and late stage investments through that fund that's specifically designed only for gaming companies or gaming studios. So it's like a full stack capital provider. I love it. I mean, it solves for the problems or the gaps of funding in these industries. But isn't that risky? They're taking the whole risk over the life cycle of the companies they invest in on their own. Did you think this is risky? What do you think about the
I
model
think
in
that's
general?
what has been Mirak's strategy from the beginning. Even in their earlier investments in their other fund, they are very strict about what valuation they come in and how much percentage they're going to take from the company. They're okay with being the only investors in, because when they decide to invest into a company, they've done all the due diligence, knowing this is the company we can take from A to Z. And that's their strategy, which is, again, different from the spray and pray. Let's invest in so many and one of them will make up. No, they're saying, okay, we'll invest in you. We'll have all the team ready to help you with resources, with any stuff, whatever you need. The next round, don't worry about who's going to raise. We're coming in again. They're removing that fundraising issue for that founder, knowing that if you meet the metrics and the vision we have for you, will help you reach the goal that you have. So it's a win-win situation. Let's work all together. And I think they played that into their gaming fund. Same, again, they understand there's not much mature companies, so they created this accelerator program so that they de-risk a bit the investment side on the idea stage part. Make sure that you are mature enough that you can actually meet the targets we're putting for you. You've proven yourself. Let's invest with you, and then we'll continue to invest with you until the end, because again, you've proven yourself with us.
Do you know how much ownership percentage do they target? And if there's control, I mean, would founders be okay with one partner taking such a big stake and maybe, try to enforce
Well, I don't
the
know
direction
for
of the
sure,
company?
but I've heard it's around 10%. But again, I think it's case by case that people have to really check.
Oh, that's not
maybe
okay.
different models. Yeah. No.
I
I think they're,
thought much
again,
bigger.
reasonable
Well, yeah.
VC, but they're
10
very
is
focused
reasonable.
on, we're here, we want to go in, this is what we're thinking the valuation should be, this is what we think the percentage should be, and this is what we want to go with. Like it or not, we're not negotiating. Which is, again, a good strategy for VCs who are very strong with their fundamentals, not going with the markets of what's there and let's just take a bit pieces here and there. It's a great strategy, I believe.
I think that was an amazing action by Mirak, not have an excuse. So they are bullish on gaming, which I think the whole region are. And the excuse would be there is no pipeline, there is no deal flow for early stage startups in the gaming ecosystem or in the gaming space. That would be the excuse, and that would be basically the fact in the market. As a solution to that, they built the accelerator, the deal flow, having the pipeline, and having basically stimulating the market with early stage gaming studios that they can double down on and invest in series A and beyond. So I think that is, as Hussein mentioned, de-risking, mitigating the risk of having an exposure on one player. Basically, whomever makes it to the finish line would make a good sense to the capital, basically.
Yep. Well, it makes sense for them, and I hope all of the gaming startups in the region can capitalize on that and utilize their services. Before we wrap up, a big thanks to OCTA for sponsoring today's episode.
If you want to get paid faster, access financing, and automate your receivable process, head to weareocta.com. That is weareocta.com, and take control of your accounts receivable today.
With that, thank you so much, Fahad and Hussein. This has been a great conversation.